My name is Oren, and I wish I could tell you the exact moment I lost her. But the truth is, some endings don't arrive with thunder. They drift in like fog, soft, slow, and silent until one day you look around and realize you can't see what used to be. We've been married for 11 years. Elora wasn't the loud, dramatic type. She didn't scream or throw things. She was calm, deliberate, thoughtful. And in the beginning, that's exactly what I loved about her. She gave you the feeling of safety, like a place you could rest your soul. For a while, I truly believed we were building something rare, quiet, but solid. But lately, something in her had changed. Not loudly. Not suddenly. Just subtly. Like how she no longer asked how my day was. Or how she started humming songs I didn't recognize when she cooked. Or the way her hugs turned into polite taps on the back. I ignored the signs at first. Life gets busy, right? People drift. But they come back. At least, that's what I told myself until that Tuesday night. She stood by the hallway mirror, putting on earrings I hadn't seen before. They were simple, gold, and elegant. Not flashy, but purposeful. Her lips had a touch of color I didn't recognize. She wore a pale blue dress that fell just below the knee, fitted, flattering, but not over the top. And yet, everything about the way she looked felt intentional. Not like she was going out with a friend. No, this was something else. Elora? I asked gently, standing just outside the doorway. You have plans tonight? She didn't look at me right away. Just kept adjusting her necklace in the mirror. And then came the sentence I still hear on a loop when the house is quiet. I'm going out on a date. Try not to be too jealous. No anger. No guilt. Not even mockery. Just casual, as if she'd told me she was heading to the store. I didn't speak right away. I couldn't. I felt like my lungs had folded in on themselves. A date? I blinked. I was sure I had misheard her. Or misunderstood the tone. Maybe she was joking. A very strange, misplaced joke? But then she turned. And smiled. Not a cruel smile. Not even a smug one. Just soft. Like someone letting go of something they've been holding too long. Elora, I managed finally. What are you talking about? Her smile didn't change. I've been seeing someone. For a few months. His name's Mason. I had no reaction. My body refused to register the information. There was a slow buzzing in my ears, like the sound you hear right before a power outage. You're married, I said, not as an accusation, but as a reminder. Like maybe she'd forgotten. I know, she said. That's why I'm telling you now. I wanted you to hear it from me. That part stayed with me. I wanted you to hear it from me. As if there was virtue in her honesty. As if confessions automatically came with grace. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just stood there, waiting for her to say she was kidding, or drunk, or angry about something else entirely. But she didn't. She picked up her purse. Sprayed perfume. Turned off the light in the hallway mirror. And as she walked past me, she whispered, I'll be back late. Don't wait up. And just like that, she was gone. That night, I sat on the living room floor, my back against the couch, staring at a candle we'd forgotten to blow out. The flickering light cast shadows across the wall, shadows that danced like ghosts. I didn't cry. Not then. But I felt hollow. Like someone had carved out the center of me and left the shell standing upright. She didn't say she was leaving me. She just left me behind. The strange thing is, the house didn't feel different without her. It felt exactly the same. The air was still cold from the cracked window in the kitchen she never remembered to close. Her coffee cup from the morning was still beside the sink, the ring of dried cinnamon on the rim curling like a question mark. Her jacket was still hanging on the third hook, the one I never touched because it was her spot. Everything was still hers. But she wasn't here. And somehow that made it worse. I didn't sleep that night. I walked from room to room like I was checking on something invisible. Opened drawers I never looked in before. Stared too long at our framed photos, not because I missed her, but because I was trying to see if she had always looked slightly distant and I had just been too in love to notice. I replayed her words. I'm going out on a date. Try not to be too jealous. There was no fight. No door slamming. No cruel names. That's what haunted me. She didn't say it to provoke me. She didn't smirk or roll her eyes or act like I'd done anything wrong. She said it the way people say they're stepping out for milk. That kind of calm doesn't come from anger. It comes from decisions made a long time ago. And I had missed it. By sunrise, I was still sitting at the edge of our bed, watching light slowly slip between the blinds. I thought maybe I dreamt it. Maybe she'd walk back in. Makeup smudged from crying in the car. Apologizing. Saying she was scared, or confused, or testing me. But she didn't return by morning. Instead, a text buzzed in just after 8. I didn't want to make it messy. I'll stop by for a few things later. No explanation. No apology. Not even a sign-off with her name. It read like a business memo. I didn't reply, not because I didn't have things to say, but because I was afraid she'd respond. And I didn't know if I could handle more of her nothingness. I went to work that day, or tried to, but the meetings were just moving mouths. I nodded in the right places, said good point once or twice. People probably thought I was just tired. In truth, I was watching the hours tick by, wondering where she was, wondering if he kissed her forehead the way I used to, wondering if she wore the same perfume, if she laughed with him in the car, if she was glad she told me the truth, or if she forgot she even had. Later that evening, I stood at the front window. She pulled up around 6:40. Same car. Different woman. She didn't knock. She used her key. Slipped in quietly like a guest at her own wake. No eye contact. She went straight to the closet in the hallway, pulled out 2 canvas bags, and filled them with random things. Hairbrush, charger, 3 books, a hoodie, a small gray pouch I hadn't seen in years. She moved quickly like someone trying to avoid being watched. But not guilty. Just efficient. I stood at the end of the hall, my hands in my pockets. I wanted to say something, anything, but it was like the words were stuck under my tongue. Then she did something I didn't expect. She paused, looked over at me briefly, and said softly, "I didn't want to lie to you anymore." And just like that, she was gone again. No slam. No drama. Just air where she used to be. And I stood there thinking, what else had she told me with that same softness over the years? What else had she said? That wasn't really true. It's strange how sound changes after someone leaves. It's not just the absence of footsteps or the missing voice in the next room. It's the absence of expectation. You stop listening for anything at all. And that's when the silence becomes sharp. She didn't take everything. Not even half. Just enough to mean something. Not enough to make it final. The books she grabbed were all ones I'd given her over the years. Not the expensive ones. Just the ones with my notes in the margins. I noticed that. I noticed too much. I didn't sleep on the bed that night. I sat in the hallway instead. Back against the wall. Knees up. There's a light there. A small one, warm yellow, just above the baseboard. I installed it years ago because she said the dark edges of the house unsettled her. Funny. I think I sat there waiting for her shadow to pass by again. But it didn't. The next morning, the house smelled the same. Still that hint of cinnamon in the kitchen cabinet she loved. Still her shampoo in the bathroom steam, faintly clinging to the towel rack. It made me feel ridiculous, to be haunted by things that hadn't left. That's when it started happening. The memories. But not the big ones. Not the wedding. Not the vacations. No. What came back were moments so unimportant I could hardly explain why they returned. Like her tying her hair in the car mirror and asking if the angle made her face look long. Or the time she tapped a spoon against her mug 12 times before realizing I was counting. Or how she used to brush her thumb across my wrist when we stood in lines. Grocery store, coffee shop. Anywhere. Never said a word. Just that soft, passing motion. I sat there wondering. Had she already stopped doing those things? Long before I noticed? Around noon, I opened my laptop and deleted the folder named Hours. It wasn't anger. It wasn't closure. I just didn't want to look at the name anymore. I didn't open the photos. Didn't scroll. Didn't pause. Just deleted. And then I sat very still, with my fingers still on the trackpad. Like I was waiting for some kind of reaction. A sound. A shift in the room. But the only thing I heard was the refrigerator humming. That, and the echo of my own breath. That evening, I received a message. Not from her. From someone named Sutton. No greeting. No introduction. Just, I'm sorry for how it happened. She didn't mean for it to be cruel. I stared at the name. Sutton. No idea who he was. But I didn't have to guess. No punctuation in the message. No sign-off. Felt sterile. As if someone had sent it on her behalf. Maybe he had. Maybe he was the one. I closed the message. Didn't reply. Not because I was being strong. But because I didn't know how to answer something that emotionless. That night, I walked into the closet and pressed my face against her winter coat, the one with the dark buttons and faint scent of cedar. I stood there in the dark, doing nothing. No crying. No collapsing. Just breathing in the last place where her warmth still lived. 3 days passed without her voice. No texts. No keys turning in the lock. No echoes of her walking through the hallway barefoot. I spent the first day listening for her and the second day pretending I wasn't. By the third, I sat by the kitchen window, just watching the light move across the walls. Not thinking. Not processing. Just existing. There's something strange about silence when you don't choose it. It doesn't soothe. It doesn't heal. It just magnifies whatever you were afraid to admit while things were still loud. I kept thinking about the little details I had ignored. How she had started sleeping with her back to me months ago. How she no longer reached for my hand in parking lots. How she stopped asking me what I wanted for dinner and just made something for herself. I thought about how quickly she said his name. Mason. No hesitation. No shame. As if he had already been part of her world for longer than I realized. And worse, I thought about the way she said it. Not like a confession, but like a fact I simply needed to catch up with. On the fourth day, around mid-afternoon, the doorbell rang. I didn't expect it to be her. She still had a key. So I stood at the edge of the hallway, unsure whether to answer. When I opened the door, there was no suitcase. No drama. Just Elora, in a light gray sweater and jeans, holding a small paper bag. "I brought you soup," she said, almost shyly, like we were neighbors, not ex-lovers. I couldn't speak right away. The image of her standing there, looking so ordinary, so familiar, made it hard to remember that she had just undone 12 years with a single sentence. "Are you sick?" I asked, mostly to fill the space. She shook her head. "You just looked pale. The last time I saw you." I didn't move. I didn't invite her in. But I didn't close the door either. She seemed to notice the uncertainty and held the bag out toward me. One step inside, though her body remained mostly outside the frame. "I'm not here to talk," she added quickly. "I just wanted to check in. That's all." And just like that, she placed the bag on the floor, offered a weak smile, and turned to leave. But something stopped me. "Elora?" I said, the name catching in my throat like a splinter. "Did you ever think I'd be okay with it?" She paused on the steps. Her back straightened slightly, but she didn't turn around right away. When she did, her face wasn't defensive. It wasn't sad either. It was something in between, like someone remembering a song they used to love but can't quite hum anymore. "No," she said softly. "I just didn't want to pretend anymore." I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because what she said was both honest and deeply unfair. She made it sound like the pretending was mutual, like I had stopped loving her too, and we had just been going through motions. But I hadn't. I had been there, fully, even when things were quiet. Even when she started drifting, I held space for her, convinced it was just a phase, not a fracture. That evening, I opened the paper bag she left. Inside was a handwritten note on an old grocery list. It read, "Don't forget to eat. You get dizzy when you don't." Under that, her initials. Not love, Elora. Just E. It hit harder than anything she'd said out loud. Not because it was cruel, but because it was kind. The kind of kindness that feels like it doesn't belong anymore. The kind you give someone you've already left so you can feel like you still care, even if you've already chosen someone else. That night, I sat in our bedroom and looked at the empty side of the bed. Not because I wanted her back, but because I couldn't understand how someone could sleep beside me for over a decade and then just walk away without a tremor in their voice. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just kept staring at the empty space, thinking, was she ever really here with me? Or was I just loving for both of us the entire time? It arrived 2 days later. No return address. Just my name, handwritten, on a plain white envelope. I almost tossed it, assuming it was some leftover wedding invitation that never updated our status. But something about the way my name was written made me pause. No one writes my full name like that. Not even Elora. Inside was a single sheet of unlined paper. One paragraph, neatly written in what I recognized instantly. Her mother's handwriting. "Oren, I don't know if it's my place to say this, but I hope you don't think what happened was ever about you not being enough. She didn't say much to me, but I could tell she was slipping long before you could. Elora has always had a way of walking out quietly, even as a child. It doesn't mean you imagined what you had. It just means she couldn't stay. I'm sorry for what you're feeling right now. I know it's a specific kind of lonely. Marla. I read it 3 times. Slowly. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I didn't want to. There was something about the line, "It doesn't mean you imagined what you had," that rattled something in me I hadn't admitted yet. I'd been doubting everything. Not just the past few weeks. The whole 12 years. Had I dreamed it all up? Was I so desperate to be loved that I missed all the signs? Marla's letter didn't give me answers. It just gave me a strange kind of permission to believe that it was real once. Even if it wasn't anymore. I sat in the armchair by the bookshelf with that letter folded in my hand. It was warm that day. First real spring air we'd had in a while. I opened a window not to let anything out but to let something in. I didn't know what. Maybe silence. Maybe myself. I didn't eat much that day. I wasn't punishing myself. I just didn't remember how. When you've spent years making 2 cups of coffee, buying 2 of everything, folding laundry with someone's scent built into every thread, doing things for one feels almost performative. Like playing a part with half the script missing. That evening I opened my laptop. Not to look at pictures. I didn't want memories in color. I searched for her name. Nothing new. No updates. No photos with him. Just the same old posts, Elora at some museum. Elora at a wine tasting thing with colleagues. Elora in a wide-brimmed hat on a rooftop somewhere I'd never been. I stared at the smile in one of the photos. It wasn't fake. That's what hurt the most. She had smiled like that with me too. That softness wasn't invented, it was just borrowed. Temporary. Lent to me for a chapter one didn't know was going to end without warning. I closed the laptop. No music. No noise. I just sat there, in the last light of the day, holding a letter from someone who once called me son, trying to figure out how someone can disappear without leaving. Because that's what she did. Elora didn't leave in a storm. She left like a tide, slowly, imperceptibly, and by the time I noticed the shoreline was dry, she was already too far to call back. I didn't plan on running into anyone. I hadn't shaved, hadn't combed my hair, hadn't even changed my shirt from the day before. But I needed coffee filters and toothpaste, so I went to the store. The same store Elora and I used to shop at every Saturday morning, like it was part of some unwritten contract. One of those small habits that gives structure to time. And maybe that's why it felt like the wrong place to be, because the last time I was there, she was holding my hand. And now I was staring at a shelf of off-brand filters, feeling like a guest in my own routine. I hadn't spoken to anyone outside of work since the envelope came. My voice felt dusty and used. My body moved like it was still remembering how to exist without waiting for someone to text back, or walk through the door, or finish her tea so I could rinse the mug. I reached for a box, cheapest one they had, when a voice beside me said quietly, "You look like you've just been told the world's ending." It wasn't cruel. It wasn't even sarcastic. It was just observant. I turned to see a man around my age holding a carton of almond milk. Thin face. Weathered eyes. He had the kind of look that comes from spending too much time in his own head. The kind of stranger you normally ignore. But something about the timing made me pause. I laughed softly, but it wasn't real. Feels that way sometimes. He nodded as if that was enough explanation. My wife left me on a Thursday. Weird, right? I always thought it'd be a weekend thing. Dramatic. More convenient. I didn't know how to respond. I hadn't said anything about Elora. I hadn't mentioned marriage. But this man looked at me like we were standing in the same kind of quiet wreckage, just from different angles. Sorry, he added, noticing my hesitation. I've just gotten weird about reading people since it happened. You start seeing things in faces you never noticed before. He placed the milk in his cart and walked away without waiting for a reply. It wasn't a moment designed to change anything. It wasn't a movie script. But somehow it stuck. I paid for my items. Drove home in silence. Sat in the car for almost 10 minutes after turning off the ignition. Not thinking. Not trying to process anything. Just sitting. That's what the days had become. Intervals between tasks. No narrative. No arc. Just space. But that stranger, his words made something settle in me. Not pain. Not even comfort. Just recognition. That maybe I wasn't the only one living in a house where someone had left the lights on but taken the warmth with them. When I walked inside, the soup bag was still on the counter. I hadn't thrown it away. I hadn't touched it. It sat there like some kind of symbol I didn't know how to interpret. I opened it finally. The container had congealed, cold and stiff. I dumped it into the sink and rinsed it down slowly as if I were cleaning more than just dishes. Later that night, I sat on the porch. No music. No distractions. Just me and the sound of nothing in particular. I didn't want closure. I didn't even want answers. I just wanted to know if this version of my life, the one where she was gone but still everywhere, was something I was supposed to adjust to or escape from. I don't think I expected the next message from her. But just after midnight, I heard the soft buzz of my phone across the table. One notification. Her name. Simple text. Do you still want to talk at some point? Or would you rather I disappear completely? I stared at it for a long time. The word completely sat there like a dare. Like she knew she hadn't really left. Not fully. Not yet. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself feel something that wasn't sadness. It was indecision. Because suddenly, I wasn't sure if I wanted her to explain or if I finally preferred the silence. I waited a full day before answering her text. It wasn't a game. It wasn't strategy. I just needed to hear my own silence clearly before I let her voice back in. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Permission to ignore her? A reason to say yes? In the end, I wrote, "I'll talk, but I don't know what I'm expecting." She replied 2 minutes later. "That's okay. I don't know what I'm offering." We agreed to meet at a park we used to go to during the early years. Not a romantic place, just neutral. Quiet. Safe. She was already sitting on the bench when I got there. Hair tied back, a black coat, plain sneakers. For a moment, I didn't recognize her. Not because she looked different, but because she didn't look familiar anymore. There was a thermos between us on the bench, coffee, probably. She offered it without speaking. I shook my head. She didn't insist. "I'm not here to explain," she said almost immediately. "Then what are you here for?" Her eyes stayed on the trees ahead, not on me. "To let you ask questions if you need to." I didn't know where to begin. I wasn't angry, that part had dissolved weeks ago. But I wasn't neutral either. There was still a low, constant pressure in my chest, like the emotional version of altitude sickness. Something too thin to breathe, but too quiet to notice right away. "Did you love him before you told me?" She nodded slowly. "I think I loved the idea of him more than the man himself." "That's not an answer." "I don't have a clean answer," she said. "Things stopped making sense long before he showed up." I looked down at the gravel between my shoes. "You didn't try to fix it." "Us." "I know," she whispered. "I didn't want it anymore." "That's not your fault." There was something almost gentle in her voice. And that's what made it worse. If she'd been cold, or smug, or distant, I could have turned her into a villain in my head. But she wasn't. She was measured. Controlled. Kind even. Like someone delivering disappointing news with grace. "I would have stayed," I told her. "Even through the mess. I would have fought for us." She looked at me then, not with surprise, but something sadder, recognition. "I know," she said. "That's part of why I left. That stopped me." "What does that mean?" "It means I knew you'd keep trying long after it was already gone. And I couldn't live with that guilt. I couldn't sit across from someone who loved me more than I deserved to be loved." It wasn't arrogance. She wasn't bragging. She was telling the truth in the calmest way she could. The wind picked up, tugging a few leaves across the path. For a moment, I wanted to ask her if she'd ever cried about it, if she missed anything. The sound of the hallway at night. Our shared toothbrush drawer. The way we used to read in bed without speaking. But I didn't ask. Because I realized the answers didn't matter anymore. She stood up first. "If you need anything, documents, accounts, just let me know." It sounded like something you'd say to a coworker at the end of a project. I stayed seated, staring at the empty bench beside me. "Will you miss me?" I asked quietly without looking up. There was a pause. Not long. Just enough. "I already do," she said. And then she walked away. The thing is, I believed her. But it didn't feel like love. It felt like a farewell someone had practiced so many times they no longer flinched while saying it. A week passed after that final conversation in the park. I didn't reach out again. Neither did she. I didn't delete her number. I didn't block it either. I just let it sit there in my contacts like an old coat you don't wear anymore but can't quite throw away. The days felt different, not because they were fuller or happier, but because they were finally mine. I woke up without the ache of waiting for something to return. I started making 1 cup of coffee instead of 2. At first, I still paused at the cabinet, instinctively reaching for her mug, the one with the tiny chip on the handle she never cared to replace, but by the 3rd morning, my hand no longer reached for it. I began walking again. Nothing dramatic. Just 20 minutes around the block before dinner. The same route we used to take together, but now in silence. And in that quiet, something new started forming, not joy, exactly, but clarity. I noticed things I'd forgotten to see, the way the sunlight hit the bricks of the old bakery around 6 p.m., how the neighbor's cat always waited under the same bush, how the smell of jasmine clung to the last corner before home. These were small things, but they were mine. One evening I stopped by a bookstore. Not to distract myself, I wasn't trying to escape anymore. I just wanted to be somewhere that felt like possibility. I wandered through the shelves without direction until a paperback with a green cover caught my eye. Nothing special. Just a book about people finding themselves slowly. I bought it. Read half of it in one night. Not because I needed answers, but because it reminded me that stories don't always need perfect endings to matter. A few days later, I found a message in my inbox from a colleague I hadn't spoken to in years. She'd seen something I posted about design, a small freelance project I'd picked up just to stay busy. She asked if I'd be interested in collaborating. I almost said no out of habit, that quiet part of me still unsure if I was ready to re-enter anything, but then I typed, "Sure, I'd love to hear more," and hit send before I could doubt myself. That night I made a full dinner. Not frozen, not takeout, something with color, spice, actual effort. I ate it at the table with music on in the background. And when I finished, I didn't feel lonely. I felt present. I didn't celebrate. I didn't text anyone. I just washed the dishes, wiped the counter, and stood at the sink for a moment longer than necessary, looking out at the darkening street. I thought about how endings don't come all at once. They arrive in fragments. But so do beginnings. I haven't spoken to Elora since. And I'm okay with that. I don't hate her. I don't need her to apologize. What we had was real for a while. And what I have now, this stillness, this softness, feels just as real. There's no one new in my life. No grand romantic twist. Just the quiet understanding that peace doesn't always come with answers. Sometimes it comes with letting go. I'm still here, still standing, and somehow finally free.